On September 16, 2025, Hollywood reeled at the news of Robert Redford's passing. Before the shock could settle, Barbra Streisand, his unforgettable partner from The Way We Were, gave a rare, candid interview. She spoke not only about the hidden tensions behind the camera, but also about deeply personal chapters that had never been aired, the unreturned affections of countless actresses, the relentless speculation about his private life, and a portrait of a man far more complicated than the flawless icon projected on screen. So who was Robert Redford once the spotlight dimmed? And what memory did Barbra Streisand say would stay with her for life? Few realize that the connection between Barbra Streisand and Robert Redford, one that stretched nearly a decade, began with friction. The first time Streisand saw him, she dismissed him. Too ordinary, the kind of man you might pass on any street. Even after he earned cheers on Broadway and Barefoot in the Park, she could only grudgingly concede, well, he's all right. Then she watched him in This Property is Condemned and noticed those somber eyes and the interior weight he carried. That's when she decided only Redford could play the role of Hubble in The Way We Were 1973. But when she approached him, he turned her down coldly. From the moment Streisand first read the script of The Way We Were, she felt it in her bones, a story that could break an audience open. Katie Morosky, blazing, political, uncompromising. Hubble Gardner, the fair-haired prince of privilege. In her mind, only Robert Redford could give Hubble the subtlety the role demanded. Then came the first blow. Redford rejected the part. He saw Hubble as thinly drawn, a decorative foil to elevate Katie. Professionally, it stung. Personally, it hurt even more, because, as Streisand admitted, he had a point. What followed was a pressure cooker. Director Sidney Pollack recruited top writers to rebuild Hubble from the inside out, draft after draft, adding nerve and nuance. Streisand begged producer Ray Stark for more lines, more budget, whatever it took to win Redford over. Nothing moved him. Stark delivered the brutal verdict. Forget it, Barbara. Pollack, however, refused to quit. And then, while Streisand was in Africa shooting up the sandbox, a telegram landed. 2 words, Barbra Redford. She nearly cried. He had agreed at last. No one knew why he changed his mind. Everyone knew the decision changed the film's destiny. Hubble emerged textured, conflicted, magnetic. When The Way We Were opened in 1973, Streisand and Redford lit up the world. Their looks, their smiles, even a brush of hands, everything felt authentic. Audiences were convinced their love was real. The movie gripped millions, earned $50 million, and picked up 6 Oscar nominations, and was crowned by Streisand's signature song. But what fans didn't realize was this. The emotions weren't confined to the screen. Off-camera, Barbra Streisand had fallen for Robert Redford. Streisand pursued him with aching sincerity. On set, she tried to stretch every romantic moment by a heartbeat. One more second holding his hand, one extra glance into his eyes. Between takes, she found reasons to be nearby, a well-timed coffee, an anecdote that flirted at the edges, generous praise for his craft and his beauty. Robert, do you know how beautiful your eyes are? She once asked, voice unsteady. He answered with a gentle joke, a slight smile, and turned away. She didn't stop. She wrote careful handwritten letters that spilled over pages. She sent gifts he might value, rare books, a scarf she knitted herself. Once she even framed a meeting around a new project, just to be close. Polite but impenetrable, Redford kept the line, a nod, a soft thank you, and a door that never quite opened. Streisand later confessed how it tormented her. She could spend hours just watching him, wondering, what is Robert thinking? So handsome it seemed unreal, yet unreachable. Even off set, Redford stayed hard to access. He was intensely private, often slipping into solitude between scenes, sitting apart for long stretches, guarded and remote. The distance wasn't only from Streisand. It was how he moved through the world. Pollack would sigh that the moment the camera stopped, Redford retreated, avoiding Barbra's orbit. He was wary to a fault. During intimate scenes, he wore double layers of protective shorts, and he insisted she wear a bikini under the sheets, even in bed sequences. Every physical beat, even those the script required, triggered his anxiety. When Pollack asked him to deliver a suggestive line, "It'll be better this time," Redford refused in an icy tone. "I'm never bad at that. Not even as Hubble." Hollywood whispered for years about what, if anything, lay between Redford and Streisand. Barbra would only call it a complicated friendship. In truth, she felt defeated by his emotional distance. He lived behind a no-entry sign. On film, their chemistry was electric. In life, her longing met an unmovable wall, that chill fed rumors that never quite died. Some wondered if Redford simply felt safer with men. Paul Newman's name surfaced more than once. When Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid arrived in 1969, the set brimmed with stories. Redford seemed to keep women at arm's length. With Newman, he was loose, warm, even playful. Newman slipped a live chicken into Redford's room. Redford wrapped Newman's car in plastic as payback. Asked why his wife seldom joined him on red carpets, Redford smiled. "I have enough company." The answer fueled the gossip, but he never elaborated. They could argue politics or roles fiercely and still be inseparable. When Newman died in 2008, Redford publicly unraveled, calling it a wound that would never heal. They never confirmed anything, but for close observers, the glances and gestures seemed to speak. Redford's spell reached beyond Streisand. Jane Fonda, who worked with him more than once, admitted, "I always had feelings for him," then described difficulties. He disliked on-camera kissing, could be moody and withdrawn, and often seemed uneasy around women. At the 2023 Cannes Film Festival, she surprised listeners by blaming herself for some of his outbursts, before affirming he was, at heart, a very good man. Meryl Streep felt the pull too by Out of Africa 1985, especially during the river sequence where he washed her hair while reciting poetry. She never wanted that day's filming to end, even as the crew watched for hippos. She called him a careful listener, someone who could coax confidences with a kindness that disarmed her. To the industry, Robert Redford was the gentleman ideal. To Barbra Streisand, he was something else entirely, a man perpetually running from people, from pain, from being seen. The public enjoyed the polished suit and the perfect answers. She sensed the iron discipline underneath, a need to control every frame of his life. The roots went back decades. Born Charles Robert Redford Jr. in 1936 in Santa Monica, he adored his mother, Martha, who died at 40. Losing her at 18 broke him. He drifted into drinking, drifted across continents, and teetered on the edge of losing everything. The wound turned him into a perfectionist determined to manage the chaos inside by mastering the world outside. But mastery can be lonely. He carried private losses and a quiet illness that wore him down. Streisand remembered seeing him in later years backstage, alone with a cigarette, staring at nothing. Even when his body was breaking down, she said, he wanted to appear unbreakable. The deepest cut was the death of his first son, Scott Redford, at just 2 months old. He buried the grief under work instead of words. Though he later had 4 more children, the silence widened the family distance. His 27-year marriage to Lola Van Wagenen ended in sorrow. She said he was never truly present. Even after remarrying at 72, friends whispered that he never outran his fear of being left. He disliked parties and despised Hollywood glitz. One director said you could watch him leave the set and know he was going straight home. No bars, no rap dinners, just silence. Streisand once lamented that the town turned him into a victim, not a man, but an idol to be buffed and displayed. Producers pushed him into one leading role after another. Contracts stacked up, exhaustion mounted. After his infant son died, the studio still wanted him smiling on set. When he was ill, they offered pills and expected perfection. If he showed fatigue, publicity wrote a shinier story. The suit had to be crisp. The golden hair had to gleam. The answers had to glide. Streisand called it a golden cage, a brilliant prison that denied him the right to grieve, to falter, to age. They killed Robert from the inside, she said. And the worst part is he wasn't allowed to ask for help. When he took his final breath at 89, the town went quiet. Then Streisand described the last time she saw him. The immaculate leading man was gone. In his place stood a fragile elder. The suit hung loose on thinner shoulders. His once strong hands trembled as he lit a cigarette. His face looked drawn, his skin sallow. At their final lunch, he barely ate, just pushed food around as a dry cough racked him. She feared he might collapse before the meal ended. Yet something pure surfaced. They talked about art, about paintings they had made together, and he promised to give those pieces to her. After decades of distance, the mask slipped. He spoke simply, sincerely, and then it was over. When news reached her, Barbra Streisand, celebrated for her strength, broke. At the memorial, standing before the coffin of an unfinished love, she offered a portrait of contradictions, Redford as dazzling yet distant, brilliant yet burdened, a great actor and a man she adored but could never fully read. He was one of a kind, she wrote in her farewell, and I'm grateful for the chance to have worked with him. In saying goodbye to Robert Redford, she also said farewell to her own Hubble Gardner, to a love that never quite found its landing place but will live on as legend. Redford's life spanned eras and reinventions. In Van Nuys, he was the bad kid, more drawn to art and sports than study, nearly knocked down by polio at 11 before fighting back. At the University of Colorado, he lost his scholarship to arrogance and alcohol, then exiled himself to Europe, sketching in Paris, scraping by in Spain, soaking up the chaos of La Dolce Vita in Italy. Those wandering years sharpened his eye and deepened his shadows. Back in New York, he studied at Pratt and the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, then found his footing on Broadway. Hollywood noticed the hair, the gaze, and tried to sell him as its newest pretty boy. Redford refused. He wanted roles with Merrow. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid 1969 changed everything, pairing him with Paul Newman and creating an immortal duo. The Sting 1973 vaulted him to the top. And that same year, The Way We were etched his chemistry with Streisand into romantic lore. She once said that behind the smile was a man always running. It fits. The perfection was a mask, kept immaculate until the end. If his stardom crowned him, the Sundance Film Festival, founded in 1981, engraved his legacy. What began as a small Utah gathering became a sanctuary for independent voices. Quentin Tarantino, Steven Soderbergh, Darren Aronofsky, Paul Thomas Anderson, so many careers found their spark there. Sundance wasn't only Redford's gift to filmmakers. Friends say it was also his refuge, a place where he could breathe outside the studio machine. Yet leading such a cultural force took its own toll. Every speech, every initiative, every next step added weight to a man already shouldering so much. In one of her most searing tributes, Barbra Streisand said, "Robert Redford was one of the most beautiful, talented men, but also one of the loneliest souls I ever knew. He was my friend, my unfinished dream. Robert, you're home now. No more roles to play. To the public, he is an immortal figure. To those who stood close, he was a human being with wounds that never fully closed." Redford's legacy isn't only the films, the Oscars, or the institution called Sundance. It's the reminder that behind every legend is a vulnerable heart, and that the cost of becoming an icon can be bone-deep solitude. Robert Redford is gone, closing nearly a century of Hollywood's golden era. Yet he endures, not just as Hubble Gardner or the Sundance Kid, but as a man who stood between light and shadow. Barbra Streisand's final image captures it best. Captivating, yet solitary, strong, yet scarred. Perhaps that paradox is why he will remain in memory forever.